All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our How to Run for Committee Person webinar. My name is Tanisha Beju. I'm Senior Program Director here at Committee of 70, joined by my wonderful colleague, Andrew McGinley. Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself as I pull up our slides?
Sure, yeah. Thanks everyone for joining us. My name's Andrew, as Tanisha said. I'm really excited for our conversation tonight about how the Philadelphia award system works, and we're here to demystify things and answer your questions. So it should be a lot of fun.
As many of you know, the Committee of 70 is a good government organization. We're a nonpartisan one that's been around for over 120 years now. And our mission is to make sure that every single eligible voter is confident when they go to vote. They're informed and they feel confident at the polls or when they're voting by mail. And that is such a high bar, but we do what we can. And for this upcoming election, we would love for you and anyone who you would like to reach out to try and be on the ballot, to be a committee person this year. To do that, or to help you do that, we have four goals to this session. First, we want to make sure you understand how the wards are organized. That's the very fundamental question of what is a ward. So Andrew will make sure to demystify that piece. And then we'll get into what are the responsibilities of a committee person. Once we understand the number of wards, the structure of them, the ward leader, then we'll get into your role. My portion is going to come in the third section of our presentation, how to run for a committee person in terms of the paperwork. So I'll go over the nomination petition, the timelines for that, and then like a very detailed breakdown of the front and the back of the petition, as well as some tips and tricks for circulating and making sure to meet that March 10th deadline. Then we'll transition back to Andrew, and he'll go over some ways that you can be effective once you win and you are a committee person. So, uh, is there anything that I've missed, Andrew, before we get started? I want to make sure that we can get it all in the hour and make sure to get to people's questions.
No, I was just going to say, what's the best way for people to ask questions as we go? What would you prefer people do?
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So we do have a Q&A that people can drop their questions into. After each of these sections, we'll have a quick check for understanding. So it's a short little, Andrew calls it a pop quiz. It's not a pop quiz if I'm telling you ahead of time, but it's a way for us to make sure that we have hit all of the major takeaways for that section. And it's a great pause point for us to get your questions. So as you're thinking about them, drop them in the Q&A, and we'll make sure after each check for understanding portion that we get to your questions. If you want to save them for the end, that's fine too.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, love. All right, you ready?
Yeah, of course. So, I get the privilege of starting this conversation with talking about what wards are and how they're organized. And as we go through this, again, feel free to drop questions in there, but I'm going to try to do a high level and then get into some nitty-gritty details on some of the really important things. But I think one thing that's really important to be mindful of is the city of Philadelphia is broken down into 66 wards. Similar to the way the state is broken down into counties, we break the city down further. We have 66 wards across the city, and these are partisan operations, right? So ward boundaries don't like align necessarily with your neighborhood or your legislative district or even your city council district, right? It's a separate map that overlays the entire city. And for the most part, these wards are actually designed for organizing party operations in the city, right? So for every one of those 66 wards, you'll have a Republican ward and a Democratic ward. Each of the two major parties have their own ward structures in the city. Each ward contains between 11 and 51 divisions. So there are 1,703 divisions across the entire city. Ward boundaries haven't changed in a long time, and that's one of the reasons we have such a big variety between 11 divisions and 51 divisions. If you're a voter in Philadelphia, you probably think of the division as your polling place, right? So your the number of people who are registered within that division, you're all going to be voting at the same place. Each division has between 100 and 1,200 voters. Different parts of the city are, obviously differently populated, right? Some are much more densely populated, some are a bit more spread out. And so the more densely populated wards end up having more divisions to allow for everyone to vote really efficiently on election day. Oh, and one thing I wanted to note that I don't know if Tanisha mentioned, in our How Wards Work guide, which is available on our website, we have page references. So the page reference on the slide corresponds to the page of the book that we're talking about. So if after this conversation you want to follow up on anything, all of this information is included in our guide that is available on our website at 70.org.
We have such a synergy. I had just opened my mouth to say the same thing, and I was like, oh, there goes my read.
It's almost like we've done this 3 times together.
This is the first time.
So why does that system matter, right? One is what I was just talking about, electoral divisions, right? The wards and the divisions correspond to your polling place, and they really organize the election operation within your neighborhood. So when you look up your voter registration, you'll see on that card both your ward and your division. The one on the example here is the 8th Ward, 8th Division. I also live in the 8th Ward in the 35th Division, right? And so what that means is when I go in to vote, I vote at the Kimmel Center. When I go in to vote, I look for the table that says 835, right? Because there are multiple divisions voting in that same place. There's also less official ways wards are really important. Because of their role within party operations in the city of Philadelphia, they're not governmental roles, right? You're not going to be a, city employee or an elected official in that sense, but you will be an elected representative of your neighborhood. And what that means is your neighbors will turn to you for information, and you in turn will be a connection to your ward leader, and through that, all of the different elected officials who represent your party in the city of Philadelphia. So it has some sort of informal power. Last night we had an event that was actually in person, and someone said they were reaching out to meet with a member of city council, and they were talking about their role at their job. And then they said, "Oh, and I'm a committee person in this division." And the elected official said, "Oh, you should have started with that," right? Because elected officials understand the ward system, they know it's important, and they know that committee people have a lot of influence in the city of Philadelphia.
And one other thing that I'll note is we've had a bunch of questions about people who want to know exactly the boundaries. Like, how do you know where your division is? Later in the presentation, I'll talk about how to find your ward and division, as well as a street list, which it tells you definitively the parameters. One of the reasons that matters is for me, on my block, across the street is a different division than my side of the street. And so knowing which few blocks are yours will be really important later.
Perfect. Okay. So each ward has an elected ward leader, right? They are elected by the committee people, and the ward leader serves as a member of the city committee. So in Philadelphia, we have a Republican city committee and a Democratic city committee. And those committees organize operations for all of the different partisan election activities that happen within the city of Philadelphia. So those people, ward leaders, are one, powerful on their own because they represent a segment of the city, but they also elect the chair of each of our major parties in the city. So, electing the chair of the city committees, those party chairs are the ones who really have a ton of influence over the day-to-day operations of the parties in the city of Philadelphia. So, ward leaders are really, really important in that role. Each ward in the city should have both a Republican and a Democratic ward leader, right? As I mentioned, the ward leaders are elected by the partisan committee people within that ward. And the reality is there are not always not every Republican ward leader position is filled. If you go to our website, we have a website, phillywardleaders.com. You can go on there and you can see all of the different Democratic ward leaders and Republican ward leaders and their contact information. It's a really useful tool. I'll probably reference that a couple times in my talk tonight. But you will see that there are vacancies on the Republican side. That tends to not happen on the Democratic side, or vacancies do happen, but they're filled very quickly. The reason for that is the partisan imbalance in the city of Philadelphia. There are just way more Democrats than there are Republicans. So on the Republican side, you may have a ward leader representing multiple wards at the same time. You won't see that on the Democratic side. The Democratic ward system is a bit more robust, but the Republican ward system is really, really important because it does organize a lot of get out the vote operations for Republicans in the city as well. Within each ward, oh, sorry, we're going to say something, Tanisha.
I was just gonna note that people will notice that it says Republican and Democrat only. We have had a number of unaffiliated or independent voters, and so I just wanted to make sure because I thought you were finished. I wanted to just stress that this definitely is part of the partisan, like the two-party system here. So it's either Republican or Democratic.
Yeah, there's no such thing as an unaffiliated committee person, right? You have to be a registered member, and we'll talk about the qualifications later, but you have to be a registered member of your party. And I'm just going to note, in addition to the ward leader, wards often have a ward chair who's sort of the second in command, has a lot of authority, and helps the ward leader make a lot of decisions. A ward secretary and a ward treasurer to really manage all of the operations, because there are pretty big operations when it comes to getting out the vote and organizing these activities in the city. Okay, so many of you have probably, or you may have heard of this idea of an open ward versus a closed ward. And when we started to put together this guide, actually, when we put this a version of this guide together 5 years ago, we sort of talked about these as two very different things. We had open wards and we had closed wards. And the reality is, it's less of a binary, more of a spectrum. So we have open wards and closed wards. What that tends to mean is closed wards are sort of the traditional ward structures, where the ward leader normally has greater authority over ward operations, and there may be fewer formal internal processes for making decisions, right? So the ward leader is elected by the committee people, and then they're sort of given a lot of authority to make decisions about what the ward does. Open wards tend to have more formal structures, a more formal decision-making process. A lot of things are voted on, so you'll see like a open vote for every endorsement that the ward makes, as an example, and they'll also make big decisions about like the budget for the ward each year. The reality is, there's a pretty broad spectrum. We have 66 wards. 11 of them are considered to be open wards on the Democratic side. And of those, in that 66 ward, there's a lot of different variety. So in a closed ward, they may not be in a vote on every endorsement, but your ward leader is typically going to be taking the feedback of committee people as they make decisions. They're not going to be in modern ward operations. Most ward leaders are not just making unilateral decisions without consulting their committee people. So there's just they are different, and there's certainly a movement in the city to push for more open wards. But you'll see that there's a wide variety of different ways wards are operating in Philadelphia.
And then we'll come back to this at the end of the presentation, once in the conversation about how to be an effective committee person. And if you and a number of your colleagues want to make a move towards a more open ward, we'll give you some tips and tricks and conversations about that.
Yeah.
My favorite part. So as many people who have been in our webinars before know, or definitely our in-person sessions, I used to be a teacher here in the city and a middle school teacher at that. So it's always important to check to make sure that people are following along. Important for facilitators to make sure that they're hitting those key points. And in-person sessions, Andrew, what do I reward our folks with?
If you answer a question in person, you get fruit snacks. So we will be sending you virtual fruit snacks if you
Absolutely.
answer a question.
Absolutely. So the point of this is just to make sure that you can walk away from this session feeling like you have language for city committee. We don't want you to just kind of internally get it, like kind of have an idea. We want you to have like language that you can use for city committee, closed wards, and division. So I'm gonna look at our chat. You should hopefully be able to drop things in the chat if you would like. I've also been monitoring the Q&A. I don't see anything there, so I'm feeling pretty good about our discussion so far. But if you do have any clarifying questions, please make sure to drop them in. All right, so I don't see any brave souls who have dropped the answers in the chat. So, Andrew, you feel like being odd, and I'll be even.
Sure, I'm certainly odd. Um, so our first question: Ward leaders serve as member of their party's. Oh, yep, we got an answer just in time. City committee, which supervises the organization and management of the party in all Philadelphia elections. That popped up with just the time. Thank you so much.
Mhm. In a traditional or a closed ward, the ward leader typically has greater authority over ward operations.
And your division dictates your polling place. I'm sorry, dictates where your polling place is, and your ward leaders and committee people are responsible for the election operations in your area.
Absolutely. So I'll make sure to save this shot so I know who to send these fruit snacks.
We will
Um,
mail them to you. Six to 8 weeks, you'll get them.
Horrible, horrible. I don't see any questions right now, so I feel good for us to move
Great.
to the second part.
Yeah.
What does a committee person do, Andrew? And this is a great question for you, not only because of our day jobs, but you previously were a committee person.
Yeah. And it's an important role. Actually, oh, no, the graphic is on this slide too. So this graphic, I think, is really a representative of what this job is. And when I say job, the first time we did this, someone introduced this as saying it is an unpaid and thankless job. Great way to get people to do it. It is unpaid. I would certainly say it's not thankless, right? Your neighbors will appreciate the work that you do. So, as a committee person, you really are the connection point between your neighbors, this is district voters, but they are your neighbors, and the political party and politicians in the city of Philadelphia, right? You are the boots on the ground for the local party. You are trying to help connect people to government services and get problems solved. So, as a committee person, you don't have an official government role or responsibility, but you do have the ear of elected officials and the ear of their staff. So you can help people navigate these systems and figure out, hey, I need this pothole filled or this streetlight's out. What do I do? You can help people get the right information in order to get those problems solved and help serve your community really effectively. So, so the basics of the job, right? Most committee people run for election and are chosen by their neighbors to represent their division. We'll talk a little bit about the appointment process as well. Their elections are held every 4 years during the gubernatorial primary, so that's right around the corner here in Pennsylvania. And in order to get on the ballot, the person must collect 10 valid signatures from voters of their party registered as living in their division. The top two vote getters of each party win the committee person seats. So within your division, there are going to be two committee people, right? You're not the only one. And that's really helpful because it's your partner in crime and sort of getting problems solved, organizing get out the vote operations. You might, form a strong friendship with this person because you're going to work together to really represent your neighbors. Um, and so, you don't have to come in first. You could come in second. I'm sure all of you intend to come in first. But the important thing is you have to get on the ballot first. And Tanisha is going to walk us through how to do that in just a couple of minutes. But the other thing I want to note is that there are no term limits for this job. So you can serve in this role for as many terms as you wish to. That first bullet starts with most committee people run for election. The reality is we move, right? And so what happens sometimes is you're a committee person in your neighborhood and then you decide to move in the middle of your term. You can no longer serve as the committee person because you don't live in that division. And so there's a vacancy. And when vacancies happen, ward leaders have the authority to appoint a new committee person to serve out the remainder of that term. They would still need to run for reelection at the end of the 4 year term, but it's a different path to serving in that same role.
Yeah, and I just want to like belabor the same point as earlier with the party affiliation. So uh, it's the top two vote getters for each party. So should be two. In an ideal world, you'll have two Democratic committee people in your division, two Republican committee people in your division. And because it's partisan, you are only going to be on this primary ballot. So an elected poll worker like myself, you're on both the primary and the general in November, but for this role, you are just on the primary ballot. So one and done.
So we do have a question in the chat from Nicholas. The question is about what if there are not 10 registered members of that party in the division? It's a great question. So, in order to be on the ballot, you have to have 10 signatures. What you could do is you can run a write-in campaign. And I think we talk about that a little bit later. But if you can talk to a couple of your neighbors who are registered within your party and say, hey, I really want to serve in this role, and you can write yourself in when you go to vote, you can ask them to do the same thing. And that's an opportunity to get onto the to serve as a committee person if you don't have 10 registered members of the party. But Tanisha will talk you through how to find those registered voters of your party when we get to the next section of our program.
Yeah, and it is, as we noted before, with a division, every division has somewhere between 100 and 1,200 voters. So in my particular division, we have just shy of 800. And so you might not know 10 registered voters of your party in your division, but most likely you'll be able to find them, and definitely with the street list that we'll talk about. And the second part of that question had said, to be on the ballot. Um, Again, it's just in the spring. So this is just this spring. You are an elected committee person after the May 19th primary. So you don't have to worry about then being on the ballot again in the fall.
And Ryan, we are about to get to your question, so because we have the details on the page. So what are the responsibilities, right? So you're interested in doing this role. What do you actually do? Well, we have a full list of all of the different things that you should be doing as a committee person. But your main responsibility, your core responsibility, is to really help get out the vote for your political party. Sometimes that's called GOTV. And what that means is talking to your neighbors to get them to make sure that they have information about upcoming elections, who the ward has endorsed, who the candidates are, and why you support those candidates. Beyond that, there's a couple of different things you can be doing. Again, this is a lot on one slide, so I'm not going to go through this entire list, and it's all available on page 9 of the book. But you are a conduit between your neighbors and your elected officials. So one of the most important things you should be doing is attending ward meetings, right? That's where decisions get made. You should be meeting with candidates for office, and that often happens in ward meetings where they're inviting people to come who are seeking the ward's endorsement. So that's your opportunity to meet with them, ask them questions about the things that matter to you and your neighbors. Beyond that, you can make sure that you're giving out voter information to your neighbors. So if you see folks moving into the neighborhood, you can stop by with your voter registration form because sometimes people don't think of that as soon as they move. You can also help make sure your neighbors have access to vote by mail applications, right? A lot of voters choose to vote by mail. You can help get those forms to them or help them or show them how to complete that form online so they're able to cast their ballot if they're not going to be able to vote or don't want to vote in person on election day. You can also help recruit other candidates, right? So if someone's interested in running for judge or city council, they have to circulate nominating petitions just like you have to circulate. They need a lot more signatures. And a thing that you can do is help circulate those petitions for the people you really like to help them get on the ballot. So if you know someone who's running for judge, you can go around and get your neighbors to help sign those nominating petitions as well. So this gets to Ryan's question, a committee person versus the election board, me versus Tanisha. Um, So, to make it really clear, when you go to vote on election day, the election board is the group of people who are in charge of the polling place. You'll go to the check-in table, you'll have your judge of elections, your majority inspector, your minority inspector, the machine team. And those people are not committee people necessarily, right? They can be elected, they can also be appointed to make sure that elections operate really smoothly. Those are the people we refer to as poll workers. A committee person is permitted to and often does serve on the election board, but they don't have to, right? If you serve as a committee person and as someone who's on the election board, you have to make sure that you're separating those two roles, right? So as a judge of elections, you can't be doing partisan work. Your job is to make sure that everyone who's voting is a registered voter in that division and they're able to cast their ballot. It's not about making sure you're turning out the vote for a particular party or candidate. So you have to separate those two responsibilities when you're doing that work. And lots of people do it effectively. So it can certainly be done. If you're doing that, you would want to work with your your co-committee person for the division to make sure someone is still continuing to push the sort of party operations side of things.
Yeah, because definitely on the day on election day, you want to make sure that you, as the judge of election, are able to fulfill that responsibility. And it's harder to be replaced as the judge of election versus having someone who is able to do all of the important work outside the electioneering.
Okay, so what are the qualifications? You're interested in doing this. Again, you're elected for a 4-year term and there are no term limits. In order to be an elected committee person, you have to be at least 18 years of old, 18 years or older. You have to be a registered voter in the division you wish to represent, and you have to be a registered member of one of the two major political parties. So you have to be a registered Democrat or a registered Republican, because again, you're only going to be on that primary ballot. Those are the basics. If you are an unelected city official or employee, you are prohibited from many political activities. You probably know what most of those are. One of those things you cannot do is serve as a committee person. There are some differences between types of different city employees, but for the most part, most city employees are not eligible to be committee people. If you have questions about, are you allowed to do this through your job? There's a couple of different ways you can check. One, you can check with your supervisor. They may or may not know. If you're a member of a union, they will certainly know the answer to that question. And then finally, you can contact the Board of Ethics directly. You can pick up the phone. The Board of Ethics says one of the issues, they get a lot of phone calls because they always answer the phone. So you can give them a call and ask them directly, and they will tell you very specifically what your permissions are, because you don't want to have an issue with your job because of this work that you're doing to support partisan goals. We already touched on this a little bit, but there are two different ways to run. Tanisha is going to walk you through the official path, right? Running as an official candidate, having your name appear on the ballot when you go to vote, which feels really good. And you're going to have to file your nominating petition every 4 years to be on the ballot. And we're going to go through all the different tips and tricks in order to be successful in that petition process. The other way you could do it is run as a write-in candidate. That's actually what I did. When I moved to my neighborhood, I had two committee people, and then when I went to vote the next time those seats were open, I realized that those two committee people had decided not to run for re-election, and I just didn't know. So at that point, I was like, oh, I'll write myself in, and I'll talk to a couple of my neighbors, and I'll get some more votes. And so that's definitely an option you can do. This is one of those things where write-in candidates are regularly successful, so it's not that high of a bar. If you know a couple of your neighbors, what I would say is your best bet is to make sure you get 10 votes as a write-in candidate. Some ward lead, if you don't get more than 10 votes, ward leaders will have a lot of discretion about whether or not they'll seat you in that division. If you have 10 votes, they have to vote. They have to give you that role. So it's just a thing that you should be mindful of. When I did it, I actually didn't get 10 votes, but my ward chair reached out to me right after the election and said, do you really want to do this job? I said, yeah. They said, okay, let's talk a little bit about what you do. I'm a lawyer, yada, yada, yada. And she said, oh, this sounds great. This will be really helpful. We'd love to have you. So she was able to seat me in the next meeting.
One of the reasons that they will reach out to confirm your interest is that there are quite a number of write-in names during election time that are very unserious. And so
Yes.
making sure that people do have an actual interest is important, especially if you don't meet that threshold. So it's not a deterrent of like, you don't have enough. Are you serious? It's just people write very strange things.
Yes.
Just look it up. The Inquirer does a nice running list of all of the write-in names. So that's the only clarification to add there.
Yeah, thank you. So before you run, there are a couple different things you should do. One, you can look at if you go to the city commissioner's website, vote.phila.gov, you'll be able to get information on your ward, on your division. You'll be able to generate those nominating petition materials. We've been doing these presentations in person. We brought those with us. Obviously, we can't do that through the internet. And then the other thing is contact your ward leader, right? One thing that I think people should think about is you may know that you have a committee person and they may have been doing that job for 20 years. They may be done doing it, right? But the ward leader asks them to stay on because they don't have a replacement. So you should reach out to your ward leader. And again, we have a resource on our website that has all of that information listed, all their contact information listed. Reach out to them and say, like, hey, I'm really interested in doing this. Um, do you know if anyone's running? And if they say, yeah, someone's running, that doesn't mean you can't do it, right? Like you should, if you want to do this work and you think you'd be good at it, you should run, right? It's an election. You don't have to listen to just what the ward leader has said, but they often can give you some information about, oh yeah, they're interested in retiring. They're just ready to step away. They'd be happy to have someone take on this role.
Yeah, and definitely even if you feel a little bit nervous reaching out to the ward leader, we definitely encourage you to call them. We have their phone numbers listed, so call, leave a message. They will reach back out to you, especially if you're new to an area, if you've just moved to an area, or this is your first foray and getting involved. Take that like on the day you feel the bravest, make the call, leave a message, they'll call you back. And it is a really positive experience because people do want more participation. Alrighty. Again, you can see the big smile. Love to do this, a quick check. And we really hope that as you're looking at these fill in the blank sentences, that you're like, oh my goodness, this is so easy. I don't even need that keyword bank. But we have it because we definitely don't want any of this to ever be an I gotcha or for you to feel uncomfortable. We want to make sure that you absolutely feel great with these. So the keywords are election board, 4 years, GOTV, and party. Uh, and Sean has done the first one for us. So let's see. Committee people are the boots on the ground for their political. And then it's one of the words that are going to be in that keyword bank. Oh, Andrew, you're supposed to be doing this. You self-identified as odd.
So committee people are the boots on the ground for their political party, helping people connect to government services to get problems solved.
hmm Committee people's core responsibility is to help get out the vote, sometimes called GOTV for their political party.
Oh, we have Wes has dropped the answers in here as well. Their elections are held every 4 years during the gubernatorial primary election.
And a committee person is permitted to serve on an election board, often referred to as poll workers. So thank you for dropping those in the chat. We love the participation. Let me double check and see if there are some questions here. So one is about a signature, which I'm just about to talk about with the nomination petition. And then can a candidate receive access to a party list? Yep, I'm going to talk about both of those. So these are wonderful questions. Thank you for putting them in the Q&A.
Really teeing us right up for the next section.
All right, so how to run for committee person. Um, we've been talking about a nomination petition. It does not come in this manila folder. I just put it there because I love a good graphic. But if you are going to the County Board of Elections, the Commissioner's Office, that's at City Hall. And it's in room 142, like 140, 142. That's over by the Cato statue on the south side, right across from McCormick Schmidt. So that's the entrance that you would want to go to, and they'd be able to give you the form that you need to fill out the nomination petition. That's what you ask for. They'll know exactly what you mean. There's also going to be instructions that take you step by step, just like I'm about to do. And then the big benefit of going to the County Board of Elections at City Hall or going to any of our satellite election offices, the small, like mini election offices that are all around the city. We have 10, one in each district, is that they can give you a street list. And this street list will tell you, like someone just dropped into the Q&A, all of the registered voters in your division, and it tells you their party. So I'm going to go through what the nomination petition looks like, the front and the back, giving you instructions on how to fill it out, and then I'll tell you the many uses and how great the straight list is. So How do you receive the nomination petition? Like I mentioned, you're going to go to City Hall over by the Cato statue, or your committee people or your ward leader, if they're in your area, they might know that you'd be great for this and they might pass you a nomination petition. That's what happened to me for being a poll worker. There was a vacancy for judge of election, and my committee person at the time said, "If you can teach middle schoolers, you can run this polling place." I did not think so. I was very nervous. They were completely right. It was fine, but she kept pushing the paper towards me, and I'm so glad she did. But I did not know how to fill it out, and that's one of the reasons I'm so happy to be doing this webinar. The other place where you can get your form is, like Andrew mentioned, vote.phila.gov. So it's the city commissioner's website. You'll go to the third tab, candidates and campaigns, and then you're gonna click on create nomination petition. So if you want to print these at home or at work, you'll be able to type in some of the info that otherwise you would handwrite, and then you can print it at home or at work. You'll just need to make sure you do it double-sided. I'll get to that in just a moment. But you can pick up the single page down at City Hall or at the satellite election offices, or you can print it yourself at vote.phila.gov. The two most important dates that are on here, no need to kind of take it all in. Like Andrew said, the page reference is at the bottom. It's page 13 of our guide. It's digital. We'll make sure to send out in a follow-up email a copy of a link to this video on our YouTube, as well as the digital copy of our guide that'll contain all these dates. The important ones to note for right now: the first date, which is next Tuesday, the 17th, and Tuesday, March 10th. So next Tuesday is the first day that you can start walking around getting signatures on your form. Even if you've started to circulate your, if you've, hopefully you haven't started to circulate your form yet, there is the date at the end. So many people are go-getters. They're very like proactive. You do have to put a date at the end. The first day to circulate is next Tuesday. It's a 3-week petition period. But you can file right away. If you know the 10 plus people that you're going to get to sign for you, start next Tuesday, next week, and you can go and file, meaning going back to that City Hall, room 142 to drop them off. The last day to file your nomination petition is Tuesday, March 10th. It is a very strict date. It is March 10th by 5 p.m. As an elected judge of elections, I had to do a petition. I waited until the last day. I talk about it all the time. I'm not proud of it. I want you to do better than me and learn from me. I thought, it's like 2 p.m. I'll go over. It'll be fine. It was not fine. I was like number 17 in line, and the commissioners were well staffed. They had extra people. But if you did not fill out that form correctly, they were like, next, go to the back, fix it. And so you don't want to wait till the last minute. Someone had parked illegally right outside. They're like, oh, I'll just throw my hazards on and like run in and drop it off. No, please make sure to drop it off well before Tuesday, March 10th at 5 p.m. Let's get into what the form looks like, the front and the back. Make sure to drop your questions in the chat and in the Q&A. Andrew will make sure to just pause me if there's a question before I continue to move on. So the front of the
There
nomination
is a
petition.
very important question that says, even teachers do homework on the day it's due. And yes, they do. As the child of educators, in addition to a friend of Tanisha's, they absolutely do.
So it's our shame, and like we just want you to do better than us. So at the top of the front of the form, so you'll see there's a place for you to, there we go. There's a place for you to put your name, your occupation, your address, and then your ward and division. If you choose to complete the form on vote.phila.gov and automate the top portion, then it'll also tell you where you can, it'll also tell you what your ward and division is. So you might not know that at this moment, but let me tell you, you will write it so many times on this form that you will know it through and through. So, also on the follow up to this webinar, I'll make sure to do an email that includes a link to finding your polling place, which includes your ward and division. So that's at the top. It's name, occupation, address, ward and division, and then you need at least 10 signatures. Two notes about this. First, your signature counts towards your goal. Like always make sure to vote for yourself and to fill out your petition for yourself. But then we also want you to get at least 10. We say a minimum maybe of like 15 because those signatures need to be registered voters and they need to be registered in your party. And so, in case there are any issues with the voters, say you have a really contested election, there are a lot of people that want to be a committee person. Someone could challenge your signature. Another thing to note is that everyone who signs a petition, or all of the residents of your area, they can only sign two petitions. And so if someone is just like, you know, happy go lucky, they're signing everyone's petitions. Again, that date at the end will be really important. Like, whose petition did they sign first? And so they really only should be signing two. Um, Again, if you have more than 10, that's not going to be an issue. You will be fine. And again, you want to make sure that you're signing for yourself for another reason. Um, there's a certain format of how you're supposed to fill it out. So you'll need to sign first and then print your name. That seems fine, except many times we print our name and then sign. Small thing, you think like you can just do like a little arrow, not on this form. You would need to cross it all the way out. So if you sign first, print your name, do your address, date, people generally follow whatever system has preceded them. So I won't say that a lot of people don't read. I'm going to manifest that people are very engaged, but you'll want to make sure that you are telling people to sign, print, and do their address.
We
So
just
there.
had one question from Sean. Well, we had two questions. One from Ginny about making the images bigger. I hope that this, because we do like a zoom in on each different section of the petition, we don't just give you the one blank. If this doesn't work, if you go to our website and pull up the word guide, you'll be able to see these graphics printed, and you can zoom in on your home computer. The other question is from Sean about do we get signatures in one petition, or is it best to I'm sorry, do we get all signatures on one petition, or is it best to get copies of more than one petition? And what you want to do is you want to get all of your signatures on one petition,
Mhm.
uh, ideally, if you're circulating it yourself.
Yeah, and you have space for 20. And so, even with a few errors that you might have to draw a line through, you still have more than enough space on the one. All right, so let me move to the next one. With your voter signatures, gonna say it over and over. If you're running for a Democratic committee person spot, you want to make sure that you are getting signatures from Democratic neighbors. That is another wonderful reason why you should go and ask for a street list, either at your satellite election office or down at City Hall. I know tons of neighbors by their dog names. I talk to people all the time. I don't know their names, so I might not know their party. Maybe someone is independent or unaffiliated or of the opposite party from me. And so having a street list is really helpful so that One, you can learn your neighbors' names, but also so that you can see if their vote or their signature counts towards your total of 10. You want to make sure that they're registered in your division. When I moved to my neighborhood, I had served as a judge of election and was really excited to become an elected judge of election in my new neighborhood. I knew two coworkers across the street, so I was like, I've got two guaranteed votes. So I like go out with my clipboard and my blue pen because you need blue or black. And I go across the street and I'm like, oh, will you sign my petition? And they're like, oh, girl, that's so sweet. We are not in your division. We would if we could, but no. So I made sure to request a street list and make sure I knew where I was supposed to be going because, again, directly across the street, those people, we go to the same polling place, the same location, but they go to a different table, different division. So that's why that part is important. Again, minimum of 10 and the blue or black ink. Three common mistakes. So uh, just to make sure that you know what the commissioners are looking for when they go and review your signatures. If a voter has made a mistake, that's fine. It's totally fine. Just have them draw a straight line through if they like switch the name, address, or name signature. That's okay. They should draw a straight line through it and then use the next line. They shouldn't do those arrows. Also, if you are friend, if you knock on the door, you're friends with partners, if one partner signs for you, they can't, the next partner can't come up and do like the little ditto or the apostrophes right after for the address. They do need to spend just the 10, 20 seconds just writing out the address. It feels, again, right now, you're like, oh, yeah, I'll just have people fill out the address. But you feel like so excited that they're signing for you that you might not pay attention to that. So just making sure to tell people like, oh, I'm so sorry. Can you write out the address? Thank you so much. And relatedly, if one partner signs for you and maybe their partner is doing something else or they have an adult child who lives with them or just someone else who a roommate, they are not allowed. Whoever signs the petition first cannot then sign for the other person. Say the other person's making dinner, they're like, no, that's totally fine. Because the first thing that the person needs to do is write their signature, that is case in point right there why they cannot fill it out for someone else. So it does feel a little awkward when you're like, I got you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. They do need to do it. I can come back at another time. I will pause for a second, check the chat and the Q&A. All right, looks good. So the back of the form has three different sections. So I'm going to go through this first section on the back. Then there's two other sections on the back that are kind of optional. So the first part is called a circulator's affidavit. What this means is you are just notifying the commissioners about who passed around your form. You put your name, you sign it, you write your address, the end. Now, you might not have time to circulate your nomination petition. For me, last year, I think Andrew and I were doing a webinar or I don't know what we were doing, but the day that my husband and I were going to go and circulate our nomination petition for being poll workers, I wasn't able to join him. And so he went and passed my petition. So I made sure to fill out the top with my name. And then when he passed around the forms, he said, this one is for myself, this one is for my wife. And then before I turned in my form, I made sure that he signed that he was a circulator, that he passed around the form and collected the signatures. So if you are unable to do so, or if you want to volunteer to circulate somebody else's form, that's totally fine. Just make sure to put your info on the back. And then the other part is making sure that the candidate themselves affirms that everything included on this form is accurate. It's called the candidate's affidavit. There's two ways to affirm that everything on here is correct. So you write one version on the back is writing name, ward and division, address, and then getting a notary to notarize right at the bottom. I already told you my shame that I waited till the last day to submit this form. There was no way I was going to a notary as well. It just wouldn't have happened. And the commissioners know that there used to be an additional form that you could replace the notary with. New and improved on the back of this one form, your nomination petition form, you can just put the date and your address, print your name, sign to affirm that everything on this form is accurate. So it is a simplified process. Again, on the back, you have the circulator's statement, and there's three sections. Like it looks really intense, but it's just because it's in English, Spanish, and Chinese. And then whoever has passed around your form fills out that section. And then the other side is you affirming that everything on this form is true. You can either fill out the top and get it notarized, or the easy way, you can just do the new and improved section here for the candidate's declaration. So just a recap, if you want to go and pick up this form, you can go to City Hall, room 142. You might also have a committee person bring them by. You can print them yourself at vote.phila.gov. If you are printing the form yourself, it has to be double-sided. The reason it has to be double-sided is that the part I just went over, the circulator's form and your declaration that everything is true, has to be on the same form. So you can't get signatures on one side and then separately affirm everything is true. It must be the same form. You can't staple them together. So if you're able to print a form double-sided on your home computer or at work, please do. Otherwise, you can pick up these nomination forms. And then other thing, you definitely have to make sure that very top part of the front where you put your name, occupation, address, ward, and division, that needs to be filled out before people sign. All of these things, as I say them out loud, they seem so obvious. We are definitely just trying to make sure that it is so clear. Because when you are just really excited about getting your signatures or the deadline is approaching, these are things that you might lose track of, these details. Andrew, do you see anything in the chat, or is there anything that we've talked about in one of our in-persons that you
No,
want?
no, I think you're hitting all the important notes, and there are no questions so far. But again, if folks have them, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A. I'm monitoring both while Tanisha goes through the details here.
Awesome. And I know that we are coming up to time. So this is the last major part, the street list, right before I do our final check for understanding and before Andrew talks about some effective ways to be a committee person. So we really appreciate your time and attention. So the street list. This is definitely a time saver for you. I wish I had used it before I crossed the street into a different division. This is going to be a list of all of the registered voters in your division. So as a judge of election, I know we have right about 800 voters in my division. And this is going to let me know who all of those are. So you can get this at City Hall or one of the satellite election offices. You just go in and ask for a street list. They do know what you're talking about. You can just provide your address and say, I want to run for committee person. Can I get an address for this ward and division? So if you haven't had your ward and division emblazoned on your heart and mind yet, you can just say your address. They will provide one for you. And then what you'll notice on these few pages is at the top of the page says the street name. And so that way you go to the street, and then along the side will be all the numbers. I am in South Philly, like right behind Miracle on 13th. And so part of 13th includes my division, but not all of it. And so it's really important to know where you can start and where you need to stop. Then in the middle, the all important voter names so that you can learn who the pet mom and dads are. And then, of course, the affiliation, because you want to make sure that you are going to whichever party um, is yours. So if you're running to be on the Democratic ballot or the Republican, you do need to make sure that you're looking for those D and R's. And then that just lets you know which houses to go to, which ones to skip. When you're going to circulate your petitions, we always recommend that people try late weekend mornings. It's winter, it gets dark really early during the weekdays. People, if they have little ones in their home, are running off to a million different things. It's usually best to try on the weekends. Again, you want to aim for 10 to 15 votes. So a couple of hours will be sufficient generally. And the best way to get people to answer, well, to keep the door open, once they've opened the door, you definitely want to lead with, "Hi, I'm your neighbor. So I'm your neighbor at 1522, or I'm your neighbor from a few houses down." Not to disparage our energy friends who are always getting, circulations and votes. We do want to lead with the neighbor. People are really kind to their neighbor. People are good. People are nice, and they will listen, especially when you say, "Hey, I want to be your committee person." We're the people that'll really help you figure out what's on the ballot, what the ballot questions are going to be about. Once you say like the utility that you want to serve, people will go, "Oh yeah, that's great." And then you go, "Can you sign my petition? And then remember to vote for me on May 19th." That way, if there are other people running, you can, one, remind them when the primary is, because it sometimes gets short shrift when we think about elections. And then you can try and engage the support that you have. All of that needs to be done again before Tuesday, March 10th. You want to turn in your petition to room 142. Please make sure that you are there well before 5 p.m. So that you can submit your nomination petition. Also, the great thing about going a little bit beforehand is that the staff will be able to look at those parts that I have talked about with you to see if you skipped anything. So if you give yourself enough time, then they can look it over for you.
Tanisha, we have a quick question from Richard in the chat. He just wants to make sure he understands. So can you go over basically what pieces on the back of the form you're supposed to complete? Maybe if you can go back to that slide, it might be helpful.
Yeah,
Because he wanted to make sure which section had to be done.
absolutely. So move past this. So on the back of the form, you are filling out at least two of the three sections. So someone must fill out the circulator's form. So whoever is passing around your nomination petition, whether it's yourself, a friend, partner, whomever, this part does need to be filled out. And then on the opposite side, there are two ways for you as a candidate to affirm that everything on this form is true. So you can do it by either filling out the top and getting it notarized, or you can do the quick and easy way of signing this section yourself. So you're definitely going to have someone fill out the circulator, and then there are two ways to fill out the candidate's affidavit. That's an excellent question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Especially because it's new and improved. I loved it. All right, we are at time. So can you be odd? I'll be even, and then we'll go through effective ways.
Sure. So the first question is blank. Are documents signed by voters registered in your precinct? So those are not, we have our answers at the top. Nominating petitions are documents signed by voters registered in your precinct and your political party and submitted to the Philadelphia Board of Elections.
Nomination petitions do not need to be notarized anymore prior to filling or prior to filing, rather, as long as the candidate files a candidate declaration. That's the new, improved, smaller portion that's on the back of the nomination petition.
You will need to collect at least 10 signatures from registered voters in your division of the same party. Your signature counts towards that number.
And your petition should be returned by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, March 10th to City Hall, room 142. It's over by the Cato statue. But you're going to do it way before March 10th so that you have peace of mind and you do not feel the way that I did last year. So then the last section, which is great that we're going back to you since you served as a committee person.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll just spend a couple minutes here. You can actually move to the next slide, but we wanted to make sure we gave you some tips on how to be an effective committee person, right? Assuming you're going to win because you're all wonderful and you've had such great training on how to run.
Hmm.
So these are the things that you should be doing once you've been elected. So the first thing you have to do is attend that first ward organizing meeting. That is held on the third Monday after the election, and it's always in person. I think during pandemic there were some dates where that wasn't, but the meeting is always held in person, and that's your opportunity to get a sense of how the ward works, right? You're going to see who's sort of leading the discussion, if there's factions within the ward, get to know some of your fellow committee people, especially the person who also represents your division. And that in that ward meeting, they're actually going to be electing a lot of these roles, right? So we talked about the different, I think that's on the next slide. So in each ward, you're going to have a variety of different elected roles, and they're going to be elected in that first ward meeting. If you're new to the neighborhood or haven't been involved in the ward before, you might not know these people. And so you're going to probably go along with sort of what seems to be happening, or if you know any of these people in particular. But this is your chance to see who kind of runs things and also show that you can be helpful, right? So if there's an opening for a role, typically in these meetings, the ward chair or one of the vice chairs will say, hey, we really want to work on this project about, increasing our social media presence, for instance. You can say, hey, I would love to help out with that, right? Raise your hand and offer to volunteer. It could also be like, hey, we need someone who's going to pick up the coffee before we have these meetings or put away the chairs at the end of the meeting. This is your chance to introduce yourself and just show that you really want to be part of this and are eager to be helpful. So you're going to be electing lots of different people. You may not have a chance to get to know all of them before the election. They'll all introduce themselves in that meeting, and you just want to be paying attention and then make some time to get to know them after that first initial meeting. Your main job, right? We touched on this earlier, but your main job is getting out the vote. That is your main responsibility, and it is to make sure that people in your division are prepared for each upcoming election. We like to say elections aren't every 4 years, they're twice a year, every year, right? How you do that will vary from ward to ward. Some wards will use a regular old street list to do door knocking, but many of them will have sort of more sophisticated tools like electronics networks like VAN, which is the voter. I can't actually remember what it stands for, but VAN is basically an app you'll have on your phone, so you can have contact information for your neighbors, know who's registered with what party, know who's new within the division, and you can contact those people directly. When I first became a committee person, we had like an hour-long training for all new committee people where we sat together and we went over the different technology that we had access to, so we could see how we could be most effective. And then you would get updates, right? So one of the vice chairs would reach out and say, like, hey, this month our goal is to reach out to voters in your division under 25, right? And the best way to do that is via text message or via email or whatever method. And they'll help you do that. If that's something that you don't see happening, that's the kind of stuff you can step up and say, like, hey, I want to help organize this. I want to help my fellow committee people be successful. Here's my ideas, and start to talk to people within the ward to figure out the best way to do it. But door knocking is an incredibly effective tool, and all you need to do that is your street list, right? Which we already know how to get from when you were running for election the first time.
And the electronic pieces are also really helpful, as people mentioned in our in-person, if you live in a condo. So
Oh yeah.
there are some high rises that are their own division. And so, or if you live in a smaller one, but you don't often see your neighbors, or if it's frowned upon to knock on different doors, there are different ways that you can connect to people. If you're thinking, I am not a door knocker. That's not me and my style. There are other ways that you can connect with people.
Yep. The other really important thing, and I think that this is such an important role that the wards and the committee people serve, is reviewing those candidates, right? You're the eyes and ears for your neighbors. So if someone's running for city council and they're coming before you asking for your endorsement, you can ask them questions, right? There's a master facilities plan for the school district right now. You can say like, oh, you're going to be running for council. Like, how are we going to, make sure neighborhood schools stay open? My kids don't want to have to walk really far to go to school. You are the eyes and ears for your neighbors. You can ask them tough questions and they are going to answer them because that's why they're there, right? So reviewing candidates is really important. They're going to be reaching out to you typically in advance of those ward meetings. I remember when I was a committee person, well, actually, it was after I was only a committee person until I started working in in a nonpartisan role. But the list hadn't been updated. So during the last mayoral primary before the meeting of the eighth ward, I was getting phone calls from every candidate for mayor, and I just kept texting them back and saying like, I'm not a committee person, I can't help you, right? But you will get that level of outreach from people seeking office. They will be trying to in touch with you directly, and you should take that really responsibly, right? Try to be mindful of that, that you have a lot of power and you are representing your neighbors when you're having those conversations.
One of the committee people across the street, because there's a lot of committee people in my area, but brought one of the mayoral candidates for Sunday breakfast, and it was so exciting to be able to talk to one of the candidates in a small group setting, and I was really appreciative of the committee person for the other division, and I'm sure it was a collective. Decision, but it's wonderful. I had no idea that they had that amount of power to get candidates to come and chat with us.
And then the last thing, if you want to see changes in your ward, you have to work for it, right? Organizing to get your ward to endorse candidates that align with your values is one thing. You might want to be speaking out in those meetings about why the ward should be endorsing certain candidates. The other piece that we talked on earlier is if you want to see that ward move to a more open process, right? To be more of an open ward rather than a closed ward, you have power, right? And you should be talking to your fellow committee people. There's also online networks for open wards, in particular in Philadelphia. I think on Facebook, there's a pretty robust community there for people who are working in open wards and working to open up more wards. If that's something you're interested in, you should organize, right? You have to talk to your fellow committee people and talk to them about why you think it's important. And then, when the next time the ward leader or the next time the ward reorganizes after the election and you're voting for a new ward leader, you should say like, hey, I want you to move towards this more open process. I'm only going to vote for someone who's doing that if that's valuable and important to you, right? So organize by talking to your fellow committee people and also recruiting new people in the ward to run, right? If you want to see changes, you can't do it all on your own. No one would expect you to, but you can find allies and you can work with your neighbors to get more people on board within the ward.
So that is the end of this presentation. We will be reaching out to everyone who registered with this slide deck, as well as a digital copy of our How Wards Work, a link to this video, because obviously once is not enough. You want to go through again with Andrew and myself. I'll also make sure to link to the forms on vote.phila.gov, as well as our ward leader list so that you can connect with them if you would like. And then also find my polling place so that it lets you know where your ward and division is. I'm going to check one last time. I don't see any questions in the Q&A or the chat. Is there anything, Andrew, that you would like to add right before we let people go?
Yeah, I feel like sometimes when we get into the nitty-gritty of like getting the petitions right and getting it done, it can feel a little overwhelming. It's an important thing and you should take it seriously, but it's not as hard as it sounds sometimes, right? This work is so important to increase voter turnout across the city, and you have such an opportunity to make a difference. And so put yourself out there, right? Give it a try. There's lots of different ways to be successful, and we wish you the best if you choose to run for committee person in Philadelphia. We appreciate anyone stepping up to help their neighbors.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. Remember, you can't start circulating until next Tuesday. So sorry if you already did, but print the form again, go back to the name. If they sign once, they'll sign again and tell them it's fine if they sign twice for you. You only submit the one. You can start submitting next Tuesday, February 17th. They're due by March 10th. And when I shoot out the email, make sure that you just email me back if you have any other questions. And have a great night. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you all so much for coming. Have a great evening.